problems fixed, because there are now people watching us at home, and I think that it is going much, much better tonight. So thank you. Our readers tonight are Rabbi Miriam Jerris, Natan Fuchs, Deborah Luria, Beth Zoden Fuchs, Mark Luria. And actually, I would like to invite two couples to come light our candles after our first reading. Arthur, if you would. Where the world is dark with illness, let us kindle the light of healing. Where the world is bleak with suffering, let us kindle the light of caring. Where the world is dimmed by lies, let us kindle the light of truth. May we honor the lighting of this flame, may the honor of lighting this flame inspire us to acts of goodness that illumine all the world. May the mitzvah of kindling these Shabbat candles remind us to sanctify life with the power of light. So I'd like to invite the Zoden Fuchs and the Lurias together to light, because you guys both had readings, which I did not know. Baruch haor v'shalom, v'shalom. Baruch haor, Baruch haor, v'shabbat. Nathan, you should. Black coordination going on here, and I'm not very good at it right now.
Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather in that spirit. Even as we imagine Shabbat anew, may we too find rest from the day's work and refuge from our cares. May we too feel the warmth of love and companionship. May we too feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive. Together,
may we be blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with Shabbat light. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomrei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Rodefei HaShalom, Shalom Aleichem. Mo'em LeShalom, Ohavei HaShalom, Leichem LeShalom. Miyom Zelayamim Hamayim, Shalom Aleichem.
Tonight, as we welcome Shabbat, we look to this moment in time to once again gain perspective on where we've been and where we're going. On this Shabbat, may we find the space to consider and to challenge. May we find the courage to do what is right. Together, let us find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose, and appreciate our accomplishments. Let us find the strength to continue working for ourselves and others. Let us share the burdens and blessings of responsibility. Let us locate the will to change the things we can no longer accept. Let us do all of this and more, mindful that we're a community of humanistic Jewish believers, unbroken and unbowed, prepared to face all that life has in store for us. Let us strive to feel these bonds of belief and community when we are together and when we're apart. Let us rejoice in our ties. Let us rejoice in our collective power. Let us rejoice in the gift of Shabbat.
ערב של שושנים, נצאנה אל הבוסתן, אור ושמימו לבונה, לרעב מפתן. לילה יורד לאט, ברוח שושן נושבה, אבל פלש לך שיר בלט, של אהבה.
Masks fog with my glasses. I can stay the cheers of others if I can see myself as diminished of their sorrows. I can hasten time when everyone will be able to rejoice in freedom. And if I can see myself as the companion of those fighting against oppression, I can honor the struggle of people everywhere to gain dignity and deliverance from bondage. When I look in the mirror, who will I see?
Ori, ori bi, Evo tikvati bi, Evo klochi bi, vegamba, Evo klochi bi, vegamba. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me. And in you, and in you.
Shabbat Shalom. Please take a deep breath with me. May we breathe in love, creativity, our dreams, and perseverance, all with intention. It is because I'm adding it. Improv. Thank you. Thank you. So the rest will have meaning. May we exhale hopelessness. The transforming power of love, the redeeming power of compassion, the healing power of forgiveness. These endure in every age. The joy which comes from sharing, the strength which comes from striving, the nourishment which comes from nature, these endure in every age. The sanctity of life, the value of truth, the primacy of justice, these
endure in every age. Amidst never-ending change, may we have the wisdom to know and to cherish these teachings which endure for all time.
מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראותו. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראותו. לצור לשון חמרה, ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. צור מרע עשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. לצור לשון חמרה, ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. צור מרע עשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. מי האיש החפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראותו.
Shabbat Shalom. If there is to be peace in the world,
Peace in the nation.
if there is to be peace in the nations,
There must be peace in the cities.
if there is to be peace in the cities,
There must be peace between neighbors.
if there is to be peace between neighbors,
There must be peace in the home.
if there is to be peace in the home,
Nase shalom, shalom Allah. Nase shalom aleinu. Velko olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom aleinu velko olam ve'imru shalom. Nase shalom, shalom olam. Nase shalom aleinu. Velkol olam ve'imru shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and our support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our members of our community and to their loved ones.
Eloheinu, Nekoron Avraham, Mitevrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Shalom. Mekom hakoach betocheinu, Nekoron Avraham, Mitevrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
I'll read it. I lost your voice. I lost your timbre, your cadence, your accent. I lost your voice. I had it the first month. I had it the first year. Then it faded. Then it was gone. I lost your voice. I can't hear it anymore. I lost your voice, but not your words of approval, your words of wisdom, your words of support, of love, of guidance. I lost your voice, but I'll always have your words. Our thoughts turn now to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight we continue to mourn the Shloshim, the first 30 days of the loss of Norman Tepley, our beloved friend and congregant, as we also observe tonight the yahrzeits of Charles Bonnet, Marilyn Dorfman, Herman Gayden, Doris Lee, Doralee Goldman, Joseph Kahn, Jack Keller, Earl Lapp, E. Levin, Harold Luria, Shirley Malinsky, Michael Muroff, Lorraine Pivnik, and Sarah Schiff. If there's someone else whom you're thinking about tonight, as we did just a moment ago, we'll start on the aisle here. Anybody? Over in this section? Yes, Carolyn. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody on this side or in the back? Yehi zichram livracha, may memories of these beloved people serve as a comfort to us as we go through our lives now in their absence. I invite you now to stand as we recite together a humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Together, Nit Gadal v'nit Kadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. Well, thanks everybody for showing up tonight. It's so nice to see you on Shabbat. I'm still getting used to being with you together in person, and I know we're all getting used to being a community again in person, but it certainly feels very good. I'm very, very delighted tonight that we were able to invite and for him to graciously accept Rod Montz who is the American Civil Liberty Union of Michigan's campaign outreach coordinator. Mr. Montz joined the legislative department as the field director in 2010. He manages advocacy efforts to preserve human rights and our constitutional principles. As campaign outreach coordinator, he works on issue-based campaigns. He oversees community organizing and coalition building. His focuses include the school-to-prison pipeline and juvenile life without parole. Previously, Mr. Montz worked for the United Way of Southeastern Michigan here in Detroit, where among his duties were initiatives in early child education and other related issues, and managing communications and public relations. He is active in the community at large, serving on the boards of Morningside Neighborhood Organization and Volunteer Impact, twice recognized by the Omega Psi Fraternity Southfield Alumni Chapter for his outstanding community service leadership. He holds a BS in Advertising and Public Relations from Grand Valley State, an MA in Public Relations and Organizational Communications from Wayne State, an MA in Social Justice. What a marvelous thing to be able to study from Marygrove College. Want to please ask you to join me in welcoming Mr. Rod Montz from the ACLU.
Thank you. Can you hear me with this on, or do I need to take it off? Can you hear me fine? Oh, yeah. I've done this at least once before. All right. All right, good evening. Thank you. I am glad to be here, although I have to find somebody to write me a shorter bio. And right on. You got our Smart Justice t-shirt on. I appreciate it. And Carolyn, thank you for arranging to have me here this evening. You have slides queued up for me, I'm told. All right, yeah, you can advance it. So I've been with the ACLU for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years actually. And for the last several years, I've been devoting a lot of my time to what we call the Campaign for Smart Justice. The goal is really, and I'm not going to have some slides, I'm not going to read through them all, I'm going to get through them quickly. But the ACLU realized several years ago that we need to be more intentional about the work that we do outside of courtrooms. So we really have begun to develop our capacity to organize and to engage people in advocacy work, so that we're also active in legislatures and county commissions and city councils also. The Campaign for Smart Justice has a legal component, but the majority of it is focused on trying to engage people to change laws around mass incarceration, those that feed people into the system, keep them there too long, and pose barriers to self-sufficiency when they come out. And so the goals of the Smart Justice Campaign in Michigan are to reform our pretrial system, to increase prosecutorial accountability, and that's more of an electoral thing. Last year, here in Oakland County, actually, we were very active in the prosecutor's race, trying to get people to understand the power that prosecutors have. How many people here know your prosecutor is probably your most powerful person in your county? And if you didn't know, I hope you understand that now, because they control people's freedom, right? So it's important that people be educated about the power of their prosecutors and hold them accountable for their charging decisions and sentencing recommendations. And then also sentencing reform, which is really a broad umbrella that encompasses all those things I talked to you all about before, pushing people into the system, keeping them there, and then posing those barriers when they come home. So our overall goal is reducing mass incarceration by 50% and addressing the racism that we find inherent in our criminal legal system. And you can advance this forward. So we are focused very intensely over this next year on a component of pretrial reform we didn't get before. And I'll talk about the progress we made, but I'll pause here to focus on bail reform. We really keep way too many people in jail pre-trial. As you can see here, the jail population has really exploded over the last few decades by nearly 300% at a really high cost, almost $500 million when you consider what we are spending on jails and corrections. I talked about us addressing racism in the system, and it's really clear in the data that we see that people of color and Black people specifically are jailed pretrial in disproportionate numbers, which feeds into the disproportionate incarceration of people long-term in prisons. And a lot of people are sitting in jail for really minor things like traffic offenses at really high rates. You can advance the slide, please. So last year, we saw considerable progress made on the pretrial front. I told you I've been doing this 10 years, and we are seeing now a level of cooperation that was unthinkable 10 years ago. Not only are people from both sides of the aisle uniting to try to do something to overhaul our system of mass incarceration, but they are engaging in it in, genuine, legitimate ways and diversifying the people who are at the table with them. So last year, our governor established what we call the pretrial task force that was co-chaired by, you'll see here on the right, our lieutenant governor and the chief justice of our Supreme Court, Garland Gilchrist and Bridget Mary McCormick, and included the leadership of the House and the Senate. And they were supported by the Pew Center for Research. So they had, kind of the gold standard in research helping them along the way. You can advance this. I'm just going to start saying next. So the task force, along with Pew, did some research. Because one of the problems that we have found in criminal legal system work is that there's an absence of data collection. There's no comprehensive set of who's in jail, where, and why. And we have 83 counties doing things almost 83 different ways. But the task force went through this exercise of traveling the state, collecting anecdotal evidence, and then with the help of Pew, began collecting raw data that we hope paints a picture of where we are now, but more importantly, is the basis for setting up a system going forward where we have more uniform data collection and reporting. They found that jails don't improve safety because you get stuck in jail, and the reality is most of the people who are stuck in jail because they can't afford to get out are people who can least afford to be there, and they endure greater hardship as a result of being stuck in jail and potentially losing jobs, losing their housing, and becoming more desperate, right? So that leads them back into crime. Jails are used to warehouse people. I mentioned we have 83 counties, and I'm pretty sure at least 80 sheriffs will tell you they're the biggest mental health services provider in their county, although none of them are set up to do that. But they are dealing with a mentally ill population that didn't need to be there in the first place. And then because people are stuck in jail, they really are not getting the due process and other protections that they deserve. So it's at the point now where we use the term criminal legal system intentionally because there's very little justice in it as a result of the way in which people get ensnared in this pretrial mess. Next. The task force came up with a set of recommendations that turned into a package of pretty broad bills that helped reform our pretrial system. You can go to the next one. So we had recommendations regarding, the driver's license suspensions, misdemeanors, and the mandatory minimum jail sentences, the low-level stuff that carries way too severe consequences that lead to people being incarcerated who really don't need to be locked up because they don't pose any sort of threat to public safety. And then the second wave of that package addressed things like sentencing, probation, and parole, alternatives to being arrested in the first place, and some statutory standards for behavioral health for local corrections officers who, as I mentioned before, are dealing with a high percentage of people with mental illness who end up stuck in jail. So now we're on wave 3, and this is really focused on bail reform specifically in an effort to get us away from a reliance on cash bail, to make sure that the procedures around bail are more uniform and equitably applied, and that there are alternatives to pretrial detention so that those people who have the license or misdemeanor offenses don't necessarily need to be going to jail. We just need to make sure that they return to court when they're supposed to. Next. So we are working now to try to pass a comprehensive package of bail reform legislation by December over these next few months. As I mentioned, the will is there, the bipartisan support, the diverse stakeholders, the appetite exists. We just have to make sure that people are sufficiently motivated to hurry up and get this done. You all are pretty smart folks, and you know 2022 is going to be a nightmarish electoral season between the governor's race and midterm elections and 2 to, I don't know how many, 4 maybe, ballot initiatives. There's going to be a lot going on. Because we saw this package of pretrial bills that went through last session, we know that there's support for it. So we really want to try to get this done between now and the end of the year. So we have drafts of bills that we would like to see introduced. We don't have actual bills yet, but we do expect, with the help of a lot of our volunteers and supporters, to encourage our legislature to get some bills introduced this fall with the goal of trying to, get them heard in committee and then eventually to the floor for a vote and then through the legislature. They essentially focus on making our court processes more efficient so people have an opportunity for a speedy trial. The rights of the folks who are released and detained are protected. That there's data collection, as I mentioned before, that's a huge issue. And then the issue of interim bond is addressed so that those folks who get caught up, and I'm not sure if you know what the interim bond situation is, but if people are arrested, say, on a weekend and they won't have an opportunity to see a judge on that Monday, they have an opportunity to have an interim bond, right? A low-level bond set so that they don't have to necessarily be detained. And that mechanism isn't as standardized as you would like to see it. So we want to make sure that in instances where people have an opportunity to be released, that they are, and the conditions aren't so onerous that they're not able to meet them. And then we have some other bills that will need to be introduced to fix some laws that the 4 other bills would change, which is why we use the term cleanup bills. All right, so next. Now, I hope I'm not getting too in the weeds. Am I losing anybody? No, I told you all look like smart folks. All right, so for those of you who are wondering what you might be able to do to help, we need help with advocacy. We have identified legislators that we want to focus on, but we need to talk to all of the legislature. And we need to do it in a few different ways. Those personal one-on-one connections, either in person or virtually, with legislators will help. We want to equip people with talking points and training folks who may need some help in making legislative visits to be able to do so effectively, to attend legislators in district events, particularly over this next month as people are out and about in their districts. For those folks who really like to get active on social media, we're encouraging people to set up a day or two a month where people in your group are intentionally tweeting at or posting on the Facebook pages of legislators we want to reach out to. And then, the text banking fallbacks, the campaigning fallbacks of text banking and phone banking. For folks who like to do that, we're trying to facilitate making that happen. And if we can't get anything else, we'll, welcome the emails and phone calls that people are willing to make. So that's our sort of list of tactics. And next. And we have been trying to be intentional about reaching out to all of our coalition partners in this work about doing so. I am providing weekly updates online for folks. I have a standing Thursday Zoom call through which we are able to check in with people, give them updates on this legislation I told you is being drafted now, as well as the advocacy work that we're doing and our progress towards reaching out to those legislators who we need to engage in this process. And then for folks who are interested in doing the text banking and phone banking. We're helping with the technical aspects of that as well. To kind of get things going, we started doing phone banks every other Tuesday that we organize virtually, and we can have people plug into if they're not used to doing it, or if they don't want to have to set it up themselves or organize people. We have a mechanism for doing so. And then we put together a wealth of resources on our website that includes talking points and social media posts and contact information for the entire legislature and that sort of thing. Next. As I mentioned, we are actively engaging the entire legislature, but we focus on those folks we think are going to be most active in the process of getting bail reform done by December. We think it'll come through our House Judiciary Committee, which you see the members of which are included here, and House leadership. We want to make sure that our House leader understands there are a lot of people out here who want to see this get done, that the Judiciary Committee, through which we expect the bills to come through, know that there's a lot of constituents out here who want to see them get the bills introduced, have a hearing, and move these bills along, with a focus on the chairman of that committee, Representative Filler, so that he doesn't hold the bills up and make sure they get heard quickly and they move along swiftly. Next. The members of the Legislative Black Caucus, many of whom represent some of the urban districts where the issue with bail is huge, are also folks that we want to talk to very intentionally. And we do have folks, not everybody in the Black Caucus is Black. That wasn't obvious to some of you who may recognize some of the names here, but we do have a couple folks from Oakland County represented in the caucus, including Rep. Manoogian and Rep. Koopa. Next. All right, so we have began actively recruiting folks to get involved in some of the activities that I mentioned previously. Which is one of the reasons I'm here, is because we want to see who's going to raise their hand and who wants to be involved. Not that you literally have to raise your hand now, although that's not a bad thing. But I want to present the opportunities and, be clear about the support that, we're willing to provide those of you who are, interested in being active in this campaign. I've been involved in this campaign, as I mentioned, for 3 years now, and the more conversations like this I have, the more it seems that folks realize that even though this may not have been on their radar, they have some connection to it. They know somebody who's been impacted, or they know somebody who knows somebody who has. And, it's something that touches a lot of people, and it doesn't have to happen. And a lot of people don't understand the gravity of a relatively minor punishment. Early on, I had an opportunity to speak with a pastor of a local church who wanted to be involved in this campaign, and offered up his facility for meetings and so forth. And we got together for lunch back in the day where you could do that. And I wondered why he was so interested in this. And he told me that his brother had an argument with his girlfriend in their apartment, and they got really loud, and so the neighbors called the police, and the police showed up, and the girlfriend tried to assure them that they had an argument and there wasn't much more to it than that, but he ended up getting arrested, and his initial bail was set at $1,000. And one of the reasons we are really trying to put together a comprehensive set of bills is so that we address all the things that a penalty like that impose on someone who can least afford it. Bail, I don't know if you know this, should be set with considerations of the impact on that person, right? But it doesn't happen. Something that should take several minutes or more takes seconds if you ever have an opportunity to court watch in very many circumstances. So this man sat in jail for a couple weeks because the family couldn't raise $1,000. And his lawyer was working to get his bail reduced. and he was able to get it reduced to $500. But I watched this pastor tell me with this pained expression that, by the time we did it, it was the end of the month and people just didn't have any extra money. So we couldn't come up with the money. And his brother took a plea to get out of jail, right? So he sat in jail, almost lost his job as a result of that. And he pled to a charge just to get out of jail, not to have his day in court in a case that he potentially could have won. But that's how easy it is. In his case, he had a support system and wasn't as vulnerable as some people, but you get a charge on your record and that increases the likelihood, many of you know, that you will be involved in future crimes, right? So it's important that people who don't need to go to jail don't end up sitting there pretrial in the first place. If they do need to be held pretrial, that there are some conditions that are established. In this case, if they thought there was an issue with anger management, that could have been a pretrial release condition, right? Some counseling. And if that person is able to demonstrate they can get that successfully while they're waiting for trial, they should have an opportunity to come back and say, I met all these guidelines, and I will come back to court. Do I still need to do that? If a judge says no, then that's an option that reduces some hardship on that person. And they, as the research indicates, 90% of the time will come to court if you just make them understand the gravity of what they've done, and the importance of putting this behind them. In places where they've, abolished an over-reliance on cash bail or the implementation of mandatory cash bail, where they've put pretrial release conditions in place, and done things like call people or text people to remind them to come to court, they come to court in a rate of well over 90%. We think we can do that too here in Michigan, but we first have to get this legislation introduced, and we need to make sure our legislature gets motivated to do it. And if you all are interested in helping me, I'm more than happy to accept that assistance and to get you plugged in. Next, I think that's it. That is it. All right. Questions?
Did I hear right for that Oakland County now has a relationship with the mental health organization, the sheriff's office? You know about that?
Yeah, I did hear something about a pilot program, but I have not followed that closely. But I do know, and in fact, I had an opportunity to spend some time with the prosecutor's office last night, and they are really intentional about diversion and providing support necessary to address things like mental health. Yeah, I've heard that's a step in the right direction. Yeah, Prosecutor McDonald has done a good job in her short time in office, and I'm looking forward to seeing her do some really great things. Yeah. Good. As I mentioned, there's bipartisan support. There's support from the governor's office because this is really a continuation of the pretrial work we saw done last session. The folks from Pew are still involved. Some of the more conservative allies are still on board. It's just a matter of working through, some of those things that you negotiate through in any package of legislation. But because, folks have said, we did a lot last session. Do we really need to do more? It's key that they hear from constituents who say, yes, you should. This is very important, and we need to make sure we get it across the finish line as soon as possible. Well, that's a longer conversation, but I mean, we can go back a few decades and talk about the implementation of a series of tougher and tougher on crime bills, right? Stacked on top of the war on poverty and the impact of that war on peoples of color, that resulted in their communities being over-policed and them having more contact with the system and being jailed in higher rates, and being taken away from their communities, which posed hardships on those communities and made them less safe and the people in them more vulnerable. Yeah. It's unfolded over time. It's unfolded over time. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have the presentation, which may actually be as good as any other materials. So if you're interested in getting it, just send me an email, rabbi@chj-detroit.org, and I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint as a PDF, and it has all the links to all the legislators and everybody else that Mr. Mons was talking about. Thank you again. This is such an important issue. And I know my question sounded a little bit naive. I think I was looking for the first answer you gave, which was it was this crackdown, right, in the 1990s on criminal justice reform. And look at what that got us. Nowhere but suffering. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We're going to conclude tonight with Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. May peace come upon us. Salam Aleinu v'al kol ha'olam.
Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu, Orivo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam.
Thank you, Ezra. Thank you, all of you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.